The rhythm is there, even if you've never noticed it. A quiet tempo beneath your skin, regulating your hunger before breakfast, your focus mid-morning, your dip in energy when the sun starts lowering itself like a heavy coin into the horizon. It's not a rhythm you hear, nor one you consciously follow, but it is perhaps the most faithful pattern in your life, set not by clocks or calendars, but by something far older and more intimate. Your body, in its own way, tells time. Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepish Science. Whether you're tuning in tonight, or this afternoon, or during that strange twilight in between, I'm so glad you're here. If you feel like sharing, I'd love to know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I promise I won't quiz you later on time zones or daylight saving. So before you drift into dreamland, go ahead and like and subscribe. Your future sleepy self will thank you, or at least give you a thumbs up in your dreams. Now let's wind back the hourglass. Before there were watches, or even sundials carved in stone, there was this, a rhythm hardwired into you, ticking invisibly in the deep chambers of your brain. It has no second hand, yet it governs the ebb and flow of almost every biological process you possess. Scientists call it a circadian rhythm, from the Latin meaning about a day, and what a day it is, repeating itself in cellular whispers and hormonal tides, even if you were to live in a cave without sun or clock or calendar. In the early 20th century, a curious German scientist named Jürgen Aschoff built just such a cave, not for bats but for volunteers. He and a colleague, Rutger Wever, invited people to live underground in the darkness for weeks on end. No windows, no time cues, no gadgets. Just meals slid through a hatch and endless, echoing quiet. And what did they find? People, astonishingly, still kept time. Their bodies ran on a cycle of slightly more than 24 hours, sleeping, waking, digesting, and even fluctuating in temperature, as if someone were dimming and brightening the lights outside. It was as though the sun lived inside them, keeping schedule even in its absence. This rhythm isn't just about sleep and waking, it touches everything. Your blood pressure rises predictably in the morning. Your muscles are strongest in the late afternoon. Your liver enzymes rev up as you prepare for dinner. And your core body temperature dips in the late night hours, like the earth cooling in twilight. All of this, operating without your permission, under a choreography you never memorized, but somehow always perform. Even your cells have timekeeping instincts. In the laboratory of Joseph Takahashi, a pioneering neuroscientist and geneticist, researchers observed fibroblasts, connective tissue cells, cultured in petri dishes. These cells, isolated from the body, still exhibited rhythmic patterns of activity, cycling on their own. It was as if each one carried a tiny watch tucked between its organelles. But if each cell has its own timepiece, how do they all stay synchronized? That mystery leads us to something extraordinary, an internal timekeeper that acts like a cosmic maestro, keeping your body's many players in rhythm. It's not large, it wouldn't make for a dramatic museum exhibit, but it is perhaps the most powerful clock you've never seen. Of course, I should mention, this clock doesn't come with an instruction manual. In fact, it's famously bad at adjusting when you fly across time zones, stay up all night binge-watching documentaries about mushrooms, or decide to eat pancakes at 3 in the morning. But even then, it tries. It resets. It endures. Some might call that resilience. I call it quietly heroic. We're only just beginning to understand how deep this rhythm runs, and how modern life sometimes trips over it. But for now, it's enough to sit here together and marvel. Even when you think nothing is happening, your body is faithfully counting the seconds, like a lighthouse sweeping its beam, unseen but ceaseless. The conductor behind this symphony is a cluster of neurons no larger than a grain of rice. Yet despite its size, this tiny structure coordinates your internal rhythms with the sweeping precision of a planetary ballet. It lives deep in your brain, nestled in a pocket just above where your optic nerves cross. Its name, though it sounds like something out of a spelling bee's nightmare, is the suprachiasmatic nucleus. I first learned about the suprachiasmatic nucleus, let's call it the master clock for the sake of our tongues, while leafing through a neuroscience text at a library that smelled vaguely of old coffee and mystery novels. It seemed improbable at first. How could a tiny knot of cells possibly keep your entire body on schedule? But researchers have shown that when this cluster is damaged or removed, the body's circadian rhythms fall apart like a marching band that's lost its sheet music. Back in the late 20th century, A neurobiologist named Robert Moore performed a delicate experiment on hamsters, removing their suprachiasmatic nuclei and observing what followed. The result? Chaos. The hamsters no longer followed any discernible pattern of activity, no rhythm, no schedule. Just a free-form improvisation of naps, snacks, and confusion. And when scientists transplanted a suprachiasmatic nucleus from one hamster into another, yes, a sort of microscopic timekeeper swap, the recipient hamster adopted the donor's rhythm, a fuzzy nocturnal version of inheriting someone else's Google Calendar. So what makes this master clock tick? The answer, of course, is light. The suprachiasmatic nucleus isn't just a timekeeper, it's a light sensor too. It listens to the world through a special route, one that bypasses your conscious awareness. Inside your eyes live specialized ganglion cells, distinct from the ones used for seeing faces or reading this text. These cells detect the brightness of your environment and send that information straight to the master clock, like a daily weather report arriving on time from the sky. This pathway, called the retinohypothalamic tract, not that you needed another mouthful of syllables, acts like a fiber optic cable from the outside world to your inner brain. When morning arrives, these cells register the light and essentially whisper to the master clock, "It's time." The clock responds by adjusting the timing of countless processes, aligning your inner world with the sun. This is why natural morning light feels so definitive. It isn't just pleasant, it's instructive. Your body reads that early blue spectrum light and shifts gears, preparing you for alertness, digestion, and the complex cognitive performance of, say, trying to remember where you put your phone. Now, what's truly remarkable is how this clock relays orders. It doesn't send out little hourly emails. Instead, the suprachiasmatic nucleus communicates through a cascade of hormonal signals and temperature changes. It tweaks your cortisol levels to encourage wakefulness. It nudges your melatonin production toward dormancy during daylight. It even fine-tunes your liver's enzymes so that your blood sugar dances a more elegant waltz, and all of this unfolds without your awareness. You don't feel your pineal gland going offline in the morning, or your hypothalamus adjusting internal thermostat settings like a fastidious hotel clerk. You just feel awake. Eventually, the British chronobiologist Michael Hastings once described the suprachiasmatic nucleus as a conductor with a metronome that can never stop. It doesn't take holidays, it doesn't sleep in. Even when you defy it, pulling an all-nighter, sleeping past noon, it waits. And as soon as light hits your eyes again, it starts recalibrating. A quiet marvel, really. A grain of timekeeping tissue that reconciles the spinning of the earth with the pulses in your wrist. It reminds me of those ancient or mechanical models of the solar system, with each planet turning on its little brass arm. Except this one lives in your skull, and prefers darkness to brass. But even the finest clock can be fooled. Artificial light, erratic schedules, and cross-continental travel all test its judgment. And as we'll see, the modern world has thrown quite a bit of static into this once clear transmission from sky to cell. Still, it tries to stay on beat, a maestro in a noisy orchestra pit, lifting its baton and trusting the cellos will follow. Even the most elegant clock needs a signal to reset itself, and for your body, that signal is light. Not just any light, but the shifting contrast between bright days and dark nights, a contrast older than language, older than trees, older even than most stars we can name. Your internal rhythms are set by this ancient dialogue between the sun and the earth, with one chemical in particular playing a role as messenger, night watchman, and cosmic lullaby, all in one. Its name, as soft-sounding as it is crucial, is melatonin. When evening falls and the world dims, your eyes detect the change, even if you're not consciously paying attention. Those specialized ganglion cells, the ones tuned to brightness more than image, send a gentle message to the brain: darkness has arrived. That message makes its way to the pineal gland, a pine cone-shaped little organ tucked behind your thalamus. There, melatonin begins to flow. But here's the trick: melatonin is not a sleeping potion. Despite its fame in bedtime supplements and calming teas, it doesn't actually make you sleep. What it does is tell your body, night is here. It's more of a time signal than a tranquilizer. The signal says, start doing night things now. For humans, that means cooling the body's temperature, slowing metabolism, and preparing for rest. For nocturnal creatures, it might mean time to wake up and hunt. The discovery of melatonin's role in circadian biology unfolded over decades, like a mystery novel written in petri dishes. In the 1950s, American dermatologist Aaron Lerner was researching skin pigmentation and happened to isolate a substance from cow pineal glands that seemed to lighten frog skin. He named it melatonin, from the Greek melas for black and tonin for tension, and eventually realized it had broader implications than amphibian cosmetics. By the late 20th century, scientists had drawn clearer connections. Melatonin secretion peaked at night, suppressed during the day by exposure to light, especially blue wavelengths, the very kind most abundant in sunlight, and inconveniently, in screens. The pineal gland, though once dismissed as a vestigial relic, turned out to be central to our understanding of internal time. This light melatonin darkness feedback loop is why your smartphone can become a small but mighty chaos agent. That blue glowing rectangle by your bed. It sends a signal to your brain, not unlike an unexpected sunrise. A Harvard Medical School study showed that people exposed to blue light for just a few hours before bedtime produced significantly less melatonin and reported feeling less sleepy, even when their eyes insisted otherwise. Now, in fairness to modern lighting, not all artificial glow is villainous. In certain settings, say, helping night shift nurses stay alert or easing seasonal depression with bright light therapy, manipulating light can be life-enhancing. But for the average human in a brightly lit living room at 10 in the evening, the light is whispering falsehoods to your suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's still daytime, it says. Don't worry about winding down. And the master clock, ever trusting, believes it. Jet lag, that groggy, limb-dragging disorientation after long-haul travel, is perhaps the most vivid evidence of how melatonin ties us to planetary cycles. You step off a plane in a place where the sun is completely out of sync with your internal night. Your melatonin is still back at gate 17, waiting to board. It takes days to recalibrate. Scientists have tried everything from timed light exposure to synthetic melatonin pills to speed up the process, with mixed success. The body, it seems, prefers to shift slowly, like an ocean liner changing course. There's a poetic stubbornness to it. Your brain doesn't just follow the sun outside, it remembers the sun it's used to. It needs convincing. You can't just say, it's morning now. You have to show it, repeatedly. This is why camping, oddly enough, can feel so restorative. When people spend several days outdoors with no artificial light, just campfires and sunrise, they start waking earlier, falling asleep faster, and experiencing a natural rise in melatonin after sunset. A study from the University of Colorado Boulder found that just a week in the wilderness could shift participants' melatonin cycles by nearly 2 hours. The body, given a proper cue, can still harmonize with nature like a cello tuning itself to a distant bell. So the light you bask in, and when you bask in it, isn't just about visibility, it's about communication. You are, in every room and every sunrise, negotiating with your biology. Even a seemingly neutral overhead lamp becomes part of a conversation with your cells. The story of melatonin isn't just about bedtime rituals or midnight supplements, it's about how light speaks to your brain, how darkness shapes your chemistry, and how every glowing screen is a tiny flickering rewrite of your internal calendar. And still, the master clock listens. It tries to make sense of it all, even in a world where day and night blur at the edges. If you could peer into your cells, not with a microscope, but with something finer, a kind of molecular stethoscope, you'd hear a ticking, not of gears or springs, but of feedback loops, gene expressions, and proteins folding and unfolding in a kind of slow, perpetual dance. This is the machinery behind the rhythm, the clock genes, as scientists call them. The term may sound quaint, as if your DNA is wearing a wristwatch, but the truth is far more intricate. The discovery of these genes reads like a detective tale, with an unusually long timeline. In the early 1970s, geneticist Ronald Konopka and his mentor Seymour Benzer, working with fruit flies at the California Institute of Technology, identified a curious mutation. Some flies had an odd habit. Their daily activity cycles were either erratic, absent, or too fast. The culprit turned out to be a gene they dubbed period, not after punctuation, but after time itself. This was the first real hint that circadian rhythms weren't just a function of the brain's structure, but were embedded in the very code of life, written into the nucleus of each cell. More than a decade later, researchers Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young pieced together how this worked. They showed that the period gene produced a protein, appropriately named period, which would accumulate in cells, travel back into the nucleus, and inhibit its own production. When levels dropped again, the process would restart. A loop, a pulse, a rhythm. Eventually they identified other key players, genes called timeless clock and cycle, each with their own protein companions, each joining the circuit in elegantly timed roles. It's the biological equivalent of a Rube Goldberg machine, except this one runs daily, in nearly every cell of your body, without the need for marbles or mousetraps. And while the science of it is precise, the metaphor is downright poetic. These loops are clocks that reset themselves. They run because they pause. Their reliability depends on their reversibility, a bit like the tides or an accordion breathing in and out. Now imagine this happening in your liver, your skin, your pancreas, even your fat cells, because it is. While the surprise chiasmatic nucleus sets the overall tempo, the rest of your body contains thousands, maybe millions, of tiny clocks, all tuned to their own tasks. Your digestive system, for instance, follows a rhythm that anticipates when you'll eat, regulating insulin release and gut motility. Your immune system, meanwhile, ramps up certain defenses at night, when pathogens are more likely to invade, and you're less likely to fight back with hand sanitizer. The synchronization of all these clocks is what allows your body to function as a whole. Think of it like a city. The central train station might announce the hour, but each neighborhood runs on its own particular schedule. Bakeries rise early, theaters stay open late, hospitals, of course, never close, and just like a city, things can go haywire if the timing is off. When the body's internal clocks fall out of sync with each other or with the external world, it can lead to what researchers call circadian misalignment. This misalignment has been linked to a host of health issues, metabolic disorders, cardiovascular problems, even mood and cognitive changes. It's not just about being a little tired. It's about being off-tempo at the molecular level. A study published in Cell Metabolism showed that mice whose clock genes were disrupted developed symptoms akin to type 2 diabetes, even when they ate the same diet as their healthy counterparts. Another study, from the University of Pennsylvania, found that when humans were put on schedules that misaligned their sleep, activity, and meal times, their insulin sensitivity dropped and their hunger hormones became unruly. In short, the body became confused, and yet, despite these perils, the system remains remarkably robust. It can recover from jet lag, it adapts to the seasons, it holds its rhythm in the face of late-night dinners and early morning alarms. Like a symphony that plays on even when the conductor drops his baton, the loops within your cells find their way back to harmony, most of the time. There's something oddly comforting about that. That inside you right now are biological circuits so elegantly tuned, they keep you in sync with the rising sun, the ticking of seconds, and the pulsing lives of fruit flies, that your body, without a single spoken word, remembers when to warm, digest, repair, and dream. And all because of a few clever proteins, cycling through their quiet song. The funny thing about time is that even when it's shared, it's not experienced equally. You and I may sit side by side watching the same sunset, but your body might be winding down while mine is just getting its second wind. This divergence isn't just mood or habit, it's hardwired. Some of us are early risers with brains that sparkle before breakfast. Others feel most alive under the moon, thriving long after the world has gone quiet. These differences aren't quirks of personality. They're known as chronotypes. Chronotypes are essentially your biological preference for timing, when you feel most alert, most focused, most hungry. It's like your body's favorite chapter in the day, and while it can be nudged by routine, it starts with your genes. For years, being a morning person was seen as a virtue, while night owls were accused of laziness, rebellion, or too much caffeine. But science, in its usual role as myth slayer, has revealed something more nuanced. In a landmark study published in Nature Communications, researchers identified multiple genetic variants associated with early or late chronotypes, more than 300, to be precise. These genes influence how your internal clocks run, whether they're tuned a little fast or a little slow. One of the key genes involved is known as PER3, a cousin of the period gene we met earlier. A longer version of this gene tends to appear more often in morning types, while a shorter version is found in those who naturally stay up late. People with the longer version often wake earlier, feel sharper in the morning, and struggle with night shifts. In contrast, those with the shorter version are the night's poets, creative, energetic, sometimes annoyingly wide-eyed at midnight. Chronotypes are also influenced by age. Teenagers, almost universally, shift toward a later schedule during adolescence. This isn't rebellion, it's biology. Studies from the University of Munich's Center for Chronobiology have shown that teens experience a delay in melatonin production, meaning they truly aren't ready to sleep at what we might call a reasonable hour. So the 7 a.m. school bell isn't just inconvenient, it's misaligned with their biology. Then as people move into adulthood, most shift earlier again, especially by middle age. By the time we're older, our internal clocks tend to drift back toward morning, like a gentle return to our ancestral roots, when rising early may have meant survival, warmth and breakfast berries before the rest of the tribe stirred. These patterns aren't arbitrary. Evolution likely preserved a mix of chronotypes in human populations for a reason. Anthropologists from the University of Toronto and Duke University proposed a theory called the Sentinel hypothesis. It suggests that having both early and late risers in a group would have offered a kind of round-the-clock watchfulness. While the larks woke to the rustle of leaves at dawn, the owls kept their ears open under the starlight. Between them, the group was never truly asleep. Of course, today, few of us are guarding caves or fending off saber-toothed cats. But the mismatch between our chronotype and our daily obligations, what scientists call social jet lag, is very real. It occurs when your internal time disagrees with your external schedule. Maybe your job starts at 8 in the morning, but your body doesn't really wake until 10. So every weekday feels like flying east across 2 time zones, only without the complimentary pretzels. Social jet lag has been linked to a range of health outcomes. In a study from the University of Pittsburgh, people with larger discrepancies between their biological and social clocks had higher rates of obesity and metabolic issues. Their eating patterns were also affected, with more late-night snacking and less appetite control. It's not about willpower, it's about rhythm. And perhaps most fascinatingly, chronotypes may influence personality. Research published in Personality and Individual Differences suggests that morning types tend to be more agreeable and conscientious, while night owls score higher in traits like openness to experience and creativity. Of course, these are general trends, not fortune cookie truths. You can still be a delightful rebel at dawn, or a meticulous planner at midnight. So where do you land? Do you rise easily with the sun, your mind already composing to-do lists before the kettle boils? Or do you find your clarity only after the world has gone quiet, when thoughts bloom like phosphorescent jellyfish in the dark? Either way, your body isn't malfunctioning. It's following a pattern etched in your genes and shaped by eons of evolutionary trial and error. The key, perhaps, isn't to force yourself into someone else's schedule, but to understand your own and work with it when you can. Because in the great orchestra of time, not everyone plays at the same tempo. Some are violins at dawn, others are cellos in the dusk, but the music is all the richer for the difference. If your internal clock is a symphony, then shift work is like trying to play jazz while the conductor is directing Beethoven. It's a dissonance that isn't merely metaphorical. It vibrates through your organs, disrupts your chemistry, and leaves your cells unsure whether to start the day or retreat into the night. Millions of people around the world live this contradiction daily, or more often, nightly. Imagine you're a nurse working in a hospital ward, or a technician running machines in a food processing plant, or a pilot guiding a plane over the Pacific while most of the passengers sleep. Your job demands alertness, precision, and presence, just as your body, guided by low melatonin levels and cooling core temperature, is beginning to whisper, "It's time to rest." Then, when the sun finally rises and the rest of the world yawns into action, your shift ends. You head home to sleep, just as your body begins winding up again. It's like trying to fall asleep while your organs are rehearsing for a morning performance. This constant mismatch between your internal time and your external obligations is known as circadian misalignment. And it doesn't just lead to grogginess or a fondness for strong coffee. It ripples through your metabolism, your cardiovascular system, your immune defenses, even your memory. Researchers have found that people who work night shifts for many years experience significantly higher rates of chronic illness. A large-scale review published in The Lancet Oncology, a medical journal focusing on cancer and public health, revealed that long-term night shift workers have an increased risk of breast and colorectal cancers. The disruption to the body's natural rhythms appears to impair immune surveillance and alter hormonal cycles, two elements essential to cellular health and cancer defense. This finding was significant enough that the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, classified night shift work as a probable carcinogen. One reason is melatonin, not just its absence but its silencing. This molecule, produced by the pineal gland during darkness, doesn't only mark the arrival of night, it also helps neutralize free radicals, reduce inflammation, and signal DNA repair. When night shift workers are exposed to bright light, melatonin release is suppressed or delayed, dulling its protective effects. It's like lowering the castle drawbridge during a siege. The digestive system suffers too. Your gut has its own circadian rhythm, synchronized with expected meal times. When you eat during your body's biological night, as many shift workers must, your pancreas is not prepared to release insulin properly. Your liver is sluggish in managing blood sugar, and your microbiome may go temporarily out of balance. Animal studies have confirmed this. In one experiment, mice fed during their rest phase gained more weight and developed glucose intolerance, despite identical diets compared to their daytime-fed counterparts. Human studies echo these findings. A team from the University of Pennsylvania found that when volunteers were put on schedules that misaligned their eating, sleeping, and activity cycles, their insulin sensitivity dropped and their hunger-regulating hormones went haywire. Over time, this metabolic confusion can contribute to obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Shift work also affects the brain. People with irregular or nocturnal schedules often report feelings of depression, irritability, or cognitive fog. It's not just about missing sunlight, though that's part of it. Disrupted circadian rhythms alter levels of serotonin and dopamine, the brain's mood and reward messengers. A study led by researchers at the University of Colorado Boulder found that people with misaligned circadian rhythms showed increased levels of stress hormones and decreased resilience to emotional challenges. Even your immune system keeps time. Vaccination studies conducted by the University of Birmingham showed that people who received flu vaccines in the morning produced more antibodies than those vaccinated in the afternoon. That's because certain immune cells follow a daily rhythm, ramping up activity at specific times. When that rhythm is skewed, say because someone's awake at night and sleeps during daylight, immune efficiency drops, healing slows, and inflammation may rise. This isn't to say that all shift work is doomed or unhealthy. Many people work nights or rotating shifts for years and adapt remarkably well. Some even grow to prefer the solitude of night or the odd pockets of free time it allows. But the biological strain is real, and it accumulates. So how do we support the body while still answering the demands of the world? There are strategies. Using bright light therapy during a night shift can help trick the brain into perceiving daytime, helping reset the master clock in the brain's suprachiasmatic nucleus. Wearing sunglasses on the commute home can block early morning light that might signal wake up to a brain that's just finishing its workday. Sleeping in a cool, fully darkened room, even if the sun is high in the sky, can create an artificial night for the body to repair itself. Timing meals consistently, even during night shifts, can also reduce strain. Researchers suggest that eating during the biological day when the body expects nourishment and fasting during the biological night may help maintain metabolic stability, even in shift workers. Some nutritionists call this circadian eating, a kind of temporal nutrition plan tailored to biology, not just calories. And there are whispers of technological help on the horizon: wearable circadian trackers, blue light filtering visors, smart beds that adjust to your body's melatonin cycle, even pharmaceutical agents designed to simulate internal night. These tools won't rewrite the rules of biology, but they may help people navigate its curves with less friction. Still, at its core, this is not about gadgets or optimization. It's about recognizing that your body doesn't take orders from the clock on the wall. It answers to light, chemistry, and ancient rhythms shaped by the sun itself. And when we ask it to live against that rhythm, night after night, we should do so with understanding, caution, and a bit of gratitude. Because somewhere right now, under the buzz of fluorescent lights and the quiet hum of a vending machine, someone is helping a patient, driving a truck, or watching over a city, all while their cells long for midnight silence. You're not the only one with a hidden clock. The natural world teems with creatures who live and breathe by rhythms as steady and sometimes as stubborn as your own. From insects that sing only at dusk to whales that migrate with astonishing precision, animals possess biological timekeepers that rival our own in complexity and elegance. Consider the Arctic tern. This slender, silvery bird undertakes the longest migration of any known animal, flying from the northern Arctic to the southern Antarctic and back again each year. It follows the light, chasing summer across hemispheres like an obsessive sun chaser. But how does it know when to depart? The answer lies partly in the changing duration of daylight, what scientists call the photoperiod, and partly in internal circadian and circannual rhythms, which work together to coordinate such a marvel of movement. Birds in general are master timekeepers. A study led by neuroscientist Vincent Cassone at the University of Kentucky explored how birds maintain circadian rhythms even in wildly shifting environments. Zebra finches, for instance, exhibit rhythmic expressions of clock genes in their brains that match the solar cycle almost precisely. Even under constant light or constant darkness, these rhythms persist, suggesting that the avian clock is both light-sensitive and light-independent, able to keep time through a mix of external cues and internal feedback. Mammals, too, show an incredible range of timekeeping behavior. Bears preparing for hibernation don't simply wait for snow, they begin metabolic changes weeks in advance. Their bodies anticipate the coming winter through decreasing daylight and subtle shifts in environmental temperature. Internally, the bear's circadian clock slows and shifts into a longer seasonal rhythm. This circannual rhythm governs not just sleep but appetite, fat storage and hormone regulation, timed perfectly for a months-long fast in a darkened den. But perhaps no creature displays the tension between internal clock and external world quite like the Svalbard reindeer. Native to a Norwegian archipelago above the Arctic Circle, these reindeer live in a land where the sun does not rise for months in winter and does not set for months in summer. Researchers studying them expected some adjustment to these extremes. What they found instead was astonishing. During the polar night and polar day, the reindeer's circadian rhythms seemed to vanish. In constant light or darkness, their melatonin secretion flattened. They became, in a sense, timeless. Why would this be adaptive? In such extreme conditions, keeping a rigid internal clock may actually be disadvantageous. If food is scarce or predators are absent, the usual timing of activity may not matter. The reindeer seem to drift into a freer pattern, guided more by hunger and weather than by the hour. Aquatic animals have their own brand of timekeeping, often set to tides or moon phases rather than day and night. Coral polyps, for example, release their reproductive cells in mass synchrony during specific nights of the lunar cycle. In the waters off Australia's Great Barrier Reef, this spawning event paints the ocean in a gentle milky swirl of possibility, all triggered by circadian and circulunar signals working in harmony. Even humble garden insects are expert timekeepers. The cricket's familiar evening chirp is driven by light-sensitive cells in its brain, which trigger changes in wing muscle activity. In fact, if you were to bring a cricket into your home and shield it from any cues of outside time, it would still chirp rhythmically, albeit slightly off from a 24-hour cycle. Like humans in caves, it carries the rhythm within. Some of these clocks respond to seasonal cues. Take the monarch butterfly, whose multi-generational migration from North America to central Mexico is timed with such precision that the great-great-grandchildren of the summer generation arrive at the same mountaintops as their ancestors. Their circadian rhythms help regulate flight duration, navigation, and even energy storage, cued by changing day lengths and temperatures along the route. And what about animals who go completely underground? Naked mole rats, for example, live in total darkness beneath the earth. For a long time, scientists assumed they lacked circadian rhythms entirely. But more recent research has shown they do in fact maintain internal clocks, just ones that have adapted to life where light and dark offer no guidance. Their rhythms align instead with temperature fluctuations and social cues, like feeding patterns or colony activity. This reminds us that timekeeping is not just about sunlight, it's about survival. Animals evolve clocks that make sense for their environments, some following the sun religiously, others tuning themselves to tides, seasons, or the behaviors of their neighbors. For humans so tied to work hours and glowing screens, it can be easy to forget that these natural rhythms still course through us. But in the animal world, the clock is not a tool, it's a lifeline. Miss the signal, and you might miss the migration. Misread the day length, and you might starve before spring. And so, across tundras, tide pools and tree canopies, the world ticks on, not with gears or bells but with hormones, light cues and ancestral memory. A million rhythms, all echoing the same ancient principle: the right action at the right time is everything. Plants, those quiet architects of the green world, may appear to live in serene stillness, but do not mistake that stillness for passivity. Every leaf, root and stem is tuned to rhythms as precise and persistent as your heartbeat. Though they do not sleep in the way we do, plants do follow cycles of activity and rest, responding not just to the sun, but to the very idea of time. Consider the sunflower, a classic example, and for good reason. In its youth, a sunflower's head traces the arc of the sun across the sky, east to west, each day, a movement called heliotropism. Then at night, it slowly resets, turning back toward the east in anticipation of dawn. This gentle swiveling is not driven by sunlight alone. When researchers at the University of California, Davis, placed sunflowers under continuous light, the plants kept turning their heads on a near 24-hour cycle. The motion faltered without darkness, but it did not vanish. Like us, the sunflower has an internal clock, one it trusts even when the sky gives mixed signals. The idea of a circadian rhythm in plants isn't new. As far back as the early 18th century, a French scientist named Jean-Jacques d'Ortus de Myron observed that mimosa plants opened their leaves during the day and closed them at night, even when kept in complete darkness. He suspected some internal mechanism was at play. He wasn't wrong. In the centuries since, scientists have revealed a whole suite of clock genes in plants, remarkably similar in function to those in animals. These genes regulate photosynthesis, water usage, growth, and flowering. The key players include transcriptional feedback loops, just like those in our own cells, where proteins suppress their own production in a cycle that repeats roughly every 24 hours. For example, the timing of CAB expression gene, delightfully acronymed but always written out in formal reports, helps synchronize a plant's photosynthetic processes to the times of day when sunlight is most available. When this gene malfunctions, the plant grows less efficiently. It's a bit like a bakery that bakes all its bread at midnight instead of just before breakfast, technically possible, but deeply inconvenient. Plants also use their clocks to decide when to bloom. This isn't just an aesthetic choice, it's about survival. Bloom too early, and the frost may kill. Bloom too late, and the pollinators are gone. So plants integrate photoperiodism, responses to the length of day, with their internal clocks to measure time more precisely. Arabidopsis, a small flowering plant beloved by laboratory botanists, relies on this coordination. It will only initiate flowering when the days reach a certain length, ensuring it blooms in sync with the season. This sensitivity to day length is even more pronounced in crops. Rice, soybeans, and barley each have distinct photoperiodic responses that affect yield and growth. Agricultural scientists, knowing this, adjust planting schedules and sometimes even breed varieties suited for different latitudes. A soybean that thrives in the long days of Minnesota may falter in the shorter days of Mississippi, not because of soil, but because its clock gets confused. In the rainforest, where the day length hardly changes throughout the year, some plants switch strategies. They rely more on rhythmic temperature changes and internal metabolic cues. The cacao tree, whose seeds give us chocolate, flowers with exquisite timing to coordinate with tiny pollinating midges that live only in the cool, still air of early morning. One misses the other, and there are no beans. Roots, too, obey the clock. They grow faster at night, when the leaves are less busy collecting sunlight and more energy can be directed below ground. The plant prioritizes breathing in a way through its own rhythm of day and night labor. Even plant hormones such as auxins and gibberellins follow daily patterns, fluctuating in concentration as the plant decides when to grow, stretch, or rest. Then there are parasitic plants like dodder, which use their internal clocks to detect and latch onto hosts at just the right time. They time their attack to the metabolic cycles of their victims, ensuring that their leeching will be most effective. It's a botanical game of timing, less polite than it looks. And even when the environment throws surprises, cloudy days, cold snaps, a shade tree falling unexpectedly, plants adapt. But they do not abandon the clock. Instead they recalibrate, slightly nudging their rhythms until harmony is restored. This flexibility is what allows them to thrive in chaotic ecosystems without needing to run, chase, or flee. If you ever doubted whether plants were living in time, try this: place a potted houseplant in a closet, away from the sun, for a few days. Watch as its leaves begin to droop and shift, not at random, but according to a schedule written into its very cells, a clock without numbers, a rhythm without music. So when you next walk past a field of wheat, or water a basil plant on your windowsill, remember you're not just feeding a static organism, you're engaging with a quiet chronobiologist, a being whose every breath and bloom is tuned to cycles you share. Because deep down, plants don't just grow, they listen, and they remember time, even in silence. Imagine for a moment looking out the window and seeing 16 sunrises and 16 sunsets in a single day. That's not poetic exaggeration. It's life aboard the International Space Station, orbiting Earth every 90 minutes. Astronauts live in a whirl of artificial mornings and twilight. It's breathtaking, it's dizzying, and for the circadian clock, it's deeply confusing. In space, where the sun rises and sets with relentless punctuality, time itself becomes ambiguous. There is no natural day or night, only the ebb and glow of orbital mechanics. Yet human biology still clings to rhythms shaped by a planet that spins once every 24 hours. The internal clock, forged in forests and deserts, does not easily adapt to microgravity and artificial illumination. Astronauts therefore must construct time, manufacturing a day out of routine discipline and carefully managed light. Mission Control at the National Aeronautics and Space Administration assigns coordinated universal time as a base schedule, ensuring that all crew members follow the same structured day. But even with these constraints, circadian misalignment is a common struggle aboard the station. One reason is the lighting. Traditional spacecraft lighting systems used cool white fluorescent bulbs that lacked the intensity and spectral balance of sunlight. This created a kind of twilight environment, one that failed to suppress melatonin effectively or cue alertness properly. As a result, astronauts often experienced insomnia, mood disturbances, and cognitive fog. Even experienced crew members reported struggling with concentration during spacewalks or high-stakes tasks. To address this, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration introduced a dynamic lighting system aboard the International Space Station, a suite of light panels that adjust in brightness and color temperature throughout the crew's schedule. These systems aim to mimic the changes in natural light over a day: bright, blue-enriched light during morning, warmer, dimmer light during evening, and complete darkness during sleep periods. The goal is simple but profound: to convince the brain that Earth's day is still real. But it isn't just the eyes that matter. Even without light cues, cells throughout the body maintain their own circadian rhythms. In one remarkable study, astronauts aboard the space station provided blood samples at multiple time points throughout their orbit. These samples were analyzed for gene expression back on Earth, revealing that thousands of genes continued cycling in daily patterns, though some shifted or weakened, as if uncertain of the new environment. Microgravity adds another wrinkle. On Earth, your posture and movement create predictable changes in blood pressure, temperature, and fluid distribution, all of which help synchronize internal clocks. In space, with no gravity pulling you downward, those cues vanish. Blood shifts toward the head. Core body temperature can fluctuate unexpectedly. These changes blur the feedback loops that keep biological time running smoothly. Then there's the social aspect. On Earth, you rarely live in isolation from other time cues. You see others waking, eating, working. You hear street noise, watch dusk arrive through windows, and sense the slow dimming of a city. In orbit, these social zeitgebers, time givers, are reduced. Astronauts must rely on planned schedules and each other's routines to reinforce their own rhythms. And yet, in this floating tin can of ambiguity, human resilience shines. Despite the challenges, crews adapt. They rely on consistency, deliberate planning, and a bit of trickery to nudge their clocks into sync. Melatonin supplements are used sparingly, light therapy is taken seriously, and exercise plays a surprisingly crucial role. Regular physical activity not only maintains muscle and bone health in microgravity, it also stabilizes circadian rhythms by acting as a time cue for the body. Interestingly, different parts of the body adjust at different rates. The sleep-wake cycle might shift quickly with light cues, while core temperature lags behind. Hormonal rhythms, such as those of cortisol or insulin, may wander even more. This desynchrony, where one rhythm leads and another trails, is known as internal desynchronization, and it's part of why space travel feels so taxing on the body. You're not just adapting to a new environment. You're negotiating peace between your organs. These findings have implications far beyond space. Understanding how to maintain circadian stability in extreme environments could help people on Earth, especially those working in submarines, polar research stations, or intensive care units, where natural time cues are scarce. They also point toward future voyages. If humanity is to travel to Mars, where a single day is roughly 24 hours and 39 minutes, new strategies will be needed to gently stretch our internal clocks. The circadian system is plastic, but not endlessly so. Some researchers are already studying whether exposure to gradually shifting light patterns can help prepare astronauts for Martian time before they even launch. In a way, the space station becomes more than a laboratory. It becomes a metaphor, a place where time must be reinvented, and where human biology tries, against all odds, to anchor itself to a rhythm, any rhythm that feels familiar. Up there, among the stars and solar panels, the body clings to Earth, not with gravity, but with memory. Because even in orbit, we are creatures of day and night. And the need to know what time it is runs deeper than the ticking of any clock. It pulses in our cells, it dreams of home. We've always dreamed of bending time, from ancient myths of eternal youth to science fiction fantasies of time machines. The desire to outwit the clock runs deep. And while actual time travel remains firmly in the realm of imagination, scientists have been inching closer to something just as extraordinary, the ability to tweak the body's internal time. Imagine for a moment taking a pill that adjusts your circadian rhythm so precisely that jet lag vanishes like morning mist, or wearing a headset that shines light into your eyes at exactly the right wavelength and moment to reset your clock after a night shift. These aren't futuristic whims. They're active areas of research in chronomedicine, the study of how timing affects health and how we might harness it. One of the most well-known tools for circadian tweaking is melatonin. As we've seen, this molecule doesn't cause sleep, but signals that night has arrived. When taken at the right time, in the right dose, melatonin supplements can help realign the circadian clock, but the key is timing. A small dose taken 5 hours before your body's natural melatonin rise can shift your rhythm earlier. Taken too late or too close to bedtime, it may do nothing, or even make things worse. As sleep researcher Alfred Louis once quipped, melatonin isn't a sleeping pill, it's a phase-shifting signal wrapped in a capsule. Beyond melatonin, researchers are exploring light as medicine. At Harvard Medical School, Dr. Stephen Lockley and his colleagues have developed tailored light exposure protocols to treat circadian disorders and even prepare astronauts for space travel. Blue-enriched light in the morning can suppress melatonin and boost alertness, while warmer light in the evening allows the brain to transition toward rest. In fact, some hospitals now use dynamic lighting systems in intensive care units to reduce delirium and promote healing, restoring the patient's sense of day and night in environments that otherwise blur the line. Then there are more speculative tools. Scientists at the University of California, San Diego, have experimented with molecules that inhibit or stimulate the activity of specific clock proteins. One compound, KL001, was shown to stabilize a protein called CRO-RIP-TOC-ROM, extending the length of the circadian cycle. In mice, this changed the timing of metabolic processes and even protected against certain forms of jet lag. Imagine someday a personalized medication that shifts your clock by an hour or two in either direction, a gentle push, rather than a crash landing in a new time zone. Other teams are working on wearable devices that use gentle temperature changes or low-frequency vibrations to influence internal rhythms. The idea is that your body, like a tuning fork, can be subtly nudged by non-invasive cues. A smart blanket that cools your core slightly at night, or a bracelet that pulses faint warmth in the morning, might one day help regulate your body clock more naturally than any pill. Even meal timing is emerging as a powerful clock-setting tool. Known as chrononutrition, this field explores how eating at specific times can reinforce or reset circadian rhythms. A study at the Salk Institute for Biological Studies found that mice restricted to eating during their active phase nighttime for them were healthier, leaner, and more metabolically stable than those who grazed throughout the 24-hour period. Humans too may benefit from timed eating windows, aligning meals with daylight hours and avoiding late-night snacks that confuse the liver's clock. Fasting plays a role as well. Researchers at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center discovered that fasting for as little as 12 hours before travel, followed by eating on the destination's schedule, could help reset the circadian rhythm. The theory is that the body uses food intake as a key cue, so withholding food resets the clock, and reintroducing it at a new time signals the beginning of a new day. Of course, none of these methods work in isolation. You cannot simply shine a blue light into your eyes while eating a midnight cheeseburger and expect your body to thank you. The circadian system is interconnected, and its various cues, light, temperature, food, social interaction, must align for optimal effect. It's less like turning a switch and more like nudging a boat back into a slow, familiar current. Some researchers are even daring to imagine genetic interventions. Could future generations have engineered chronotypes, designed to thrive on early mornings or late nights depending on career paths or environmental needs? It's a provocative idea, and one that raises ethical questions as much as it sparks curiosity. After all, if we start editing our clocks, who decides the correct time? For now, the frontier lies not in altering our biology, but in understanding it deeply enough to cooperate with it. Instead of fighting our clocks, we can learn to pace ourselves with them. Instead of overriding the rhythm, we might simply find better ways to dance to it. In a world obsessed with speed, the idea of syncing up rather than pushing through may seem radical. But perhaps the future of time travel isn't in jumping ahead or going back. It's in learning to ride the rhythm of the present, tuned precisely to who we are and when we thrive. Because time in the body is not just a measure, it's a message, and learning to read it might be the most powerful intervention of all. Teenagers. As any parent of one will tell you, keep unusual hours. They vanish into bedrooms like crepuscular cats, appear in kitchens at midnight asking for toast, and groan at the cruel tyranny of alarm clocks. This behavior, often mistaken for laziness or rebellion, is in fact a profound rewiring of the circadian system, one of nature's most remarkable renovations in human development. During adolescence, the body's internal clock shifts. It doesn't stop working. It simply starts ticking on a different schedule. The technical term for this is a phase delay. The internal timing of melatonin release, core body temperature dips, and cortisol rhythms all shift later. This means teenagers naturally fall asleep later, wake up later, and reach peak alertness in the afternoon or evening, rather than morning. This phenomenon is biological, not behavioral. Researchers at the University of Munich, led by chronobiologist Till Roenberg, have measured the midpoint of sleep, the moment halfway between sleep onset and wake time, in thousands of people. They found that adolescents experience the latest midpoints of sleep, with a slow return to earlier rhythms in adulthood. It's not about choice, it's about clocks running on a different setting. Part of the cause lies in hormonal changes. During puberty, the brain's sensitivity to light shifts. Exposure to evening light, whether from sunset or a smartphone, has a stronger effect on delaying melatonin release. This isn't a weakness, it's an adaptation. Some evolutionary theorists propose that this shift helped distribute vigilance in ancestral groups, so that while younger children and older adults slept, teenagers remained semi-alert later into the night. Still, biology meets resistance in the real world. Early school start times, often beginning before the sun even rises in winter months, clash with adolescent sleep needs. The result is chronic sleep deprivation and circadian misalignment. A landmark study by the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended that middle and high schools start no earlier than 8:30 a.m., citing strong evidence that later start times improve academic performance, reduce absenteeism, and even lower rates of car accidents involving teenage drivers. And yet change has been slow. Many school systems continue to cling to early bells, inadvertently asking teenagers to perform complex cognitive tasks at what is, biologically speaking, their version of the middle of the night. Imagine asking an adult to take a calculus test at 4:30 a.m. while sipping tea in the dark. That's the daily reality for many adolescents. This misalignment has real consequences. Teenagers with poor sleep and disrupted rhythms are more likely to experience mood disorders, especially depression and anxiety. A study from the University of California, Berkeley used functional magnetic resonance imaging to show that sleep-deprived adolescents had increased activity in the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm bell, and reduced connectivity with the prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making and emotional regulation. In simple terms, less sleep, more drama, fewer breaks. There are also metabolic impacts. Teens with irregular sleep schedules have been shown to have higher levels of body fat, increased insulin resistance, and elevated risks of cardiovascular issues later in life. These effects are compounded when sleep patterns shift dramatically on weekends, what scientists call social jet lag, a kind of two-day time zone shift that repeats weekly. So what can be done? First, understanding. Teenagers aren't fighting their clocks, they're following them. Helping them manage light exposure can make a difference. Bright light in the morning, natural sunlight if possible, can help shift the circadian phase earlier. Dimming lights and limiting screen use in the evening can reduce delays in melatonin release. Some schools and communities have embraced later start times, often with remarkable results. In Seattle, when high schools shifted their opening bell from 7:50 a.m. to 8:45 a.m., students got more sleep, grades improved, and attendance rose. In one study, even their average mood ratings went up. It was as though the whole city of adolescents sighed in relief and finally had time for breakfast. But not all interventions require policy changes. Families can support adolescent rhythms by encouraging consistent bedtimes, even on weekends, and by treating sleep not as a luxury, but as an essential part of learning, growing, and emotional regulation. And teens themselves, when given the tools, often rise to the occasion. Apps and wearables now exist that help track sleep-wake patterns and suggest light exposure or meal timing adjustments. A well-timed walk in the morning sun might not seem revolutionary, but for a teenager struggling to focus during first period, it could make all the difference. Eventually this phase passes. Most people shift back to earlier chronotypes in their 20s, rediscovering mornings with a mix of nostalgia and caffeine. But for a few years, those electric, often disoriented adolescent years, the clock ticks differently. It's not dysfunction, it's transformation. And like all metamorphoses, it takes time, patience, and a little grace. So the next time a teenager stumbles into the kitchen at noon asking for waffles, remember they're not behind schedule. They're on their own timeline, guided by biology, pulled by unseen tides, and marching to the beat of a different clock. Healing takes time, quite literally, not just in the way wounds need days to scab over or bones need weeks to knit, but in the deeper, more precise sense that your body repairs itself according to the hour. Your cells don't simply heal, they heal on schedule, and that schedule is set by your circadian clock. For years, doctors noticed that surgical outcomes and medication effectiveness seemed to vary depending on the time of day, but the reasons remained murky. It wasn't until recent advances in chronobiology, particularly in the last few decades, that the picture began to sharpen. We now know that your body's ability to fight infection, absorb medicine, repair tissue, and even detect pain ebbs and flows with the ticking of your internal rhythm. One of the clearest illustrations comes from skin. In a study published in Science Translational Medicine, researchers at the University of Manchester discovered that skin cells involved in healing, fibroblasts and keratinocytes, migrated to wound sites more quickly and functioned more efficiently during the body's biological day than at night. Mice injured during their active phase healed nearly twice as fast as those injured during their rest phase. This isn't just about mice. In humans, the same patterns appear. Emergency room data shows that burns and cuts treated during daylight hours tend to heal faster, with fewer complications. The reasons: better DNA repair mechanisms, higher levels of key proteins involved in inflammation control, and increased cellular energy during daylight-aligned hours, all governed by circadian gene expression. It turns out your immune system also punches a time card. White blood cell counts, cytokine activity, and antibody responses follow daily cycles. Even the body's response to vaccines varies. A study conducted by the University of Birmingham found that older adults who received a flu vaccine in the morning produced significantly more antibodies than those vaccinated in the afternoon. Your immune cells, it seems, have preferred working hours. Medications, too, are shaped by the clock. This field, known as chronopharmacology, examines how the timing of drug delivery affects its efficacy and side effects. Blood pressure medications, for instance, are often more effective when taken at night, as this coincides with the body's natural dips in cortisol and heart rate. Certain chemotherapy treatments have been found to be both more potent and less toxic when administered at times that align with tumor cell vulnerability and healthy cell recovery periods. In one striking study on colon cancer patients, researchers found that time-of-day dosing reduced the toxicity of chemotherapy drugs while enhancing their tumor-fighting effects. Some hospitals and cancer centers are now designing treatment schedules based on circadian principles, aligning drug delivery with each patient's biological rhythm rather than the convenience of the wall clock. Even anesthesia behaves differently depending on the hour. People undergoing surgery in the morning tend to recover more quickly and with fewer complications than those operated on later in the day. Scientists believe this may be due to the combined effects of metabolism, immune response, and hormonal balance, all of which fluctuate throughout the day and influence how the body handles surgical stress. Aging itself may also be a matter of timing. As we grow older, the amplitude of our circadian rhythms tends to flatten. Melatonin secretion declines. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, that tiny master clock in the brain, becomes less responsive to light cues. This leads to disrupted sleep, reduced alertness during the day, and increased risk of inflammatory diseases. It's as if the internal orchestra is playing more softly, and some instruments start losing the beat. But interventions may help. Research from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies found that older mice given time-restricted feeding schedules, where food was only available during their active phase, retained better metabolic health, improved memory, and even extended lifespans compared to their free-feeding peers. These findings suggest that enforcing rhythmicity, even artificially, can shore up the aging clock. In practical terms, this means that syncing our daily routines, eating, moving, resting, with our body's natural rhythms could be one of the most accessible and effective strategies for promoting long-term health. It's not a glamorous solution, no silver bullet or miracle tonic, just timing. And timing, as it turns out, is everything. Chronobiologist Joseph Takahashi, one of the field's pioneers, once said that understanding the circadian system is like discovering a new layer of biology. It's not a replacement for what we know about cells, tissues, or organs. It's the scaffolding on which all those processes are built. A kind of invisible grid that connects everything from a scraped knee to the slow arc of aging. So the next time you wonder why a cut heals faster than expected, or why your medication instructions say take with breakfast, or why you feel sharper at 10 a.m. than at 3 p.m., remember, it's not coincidence. It's choreography. Your body is dancing to a rhythm you didn't choose, but one that has kept you alive for years, and though it softens with age and wobbles in modern life, it never quite stops. Like a clock that ticks not with seconds but with the quiet wisdom of cells that know when to grow, when to rest, and when to begin again. You might think timekeeping is a luxury of complex brains, a feature reserved for creatures with alarm clocks, school buses, and strong opinions about Mondays. But the truth is more expansive, more ancient. Life itself seems to carry a memory of time, and some of its most unusual ambassadors are animals that live without sunlight, without schedules, and sometimes without senses we take for granted. Take the blind Mexican cavefish. It dwells in absolute darkness, in subterranean rivers of northeastern Mexico, where sunlight has not penetrated for thousands of generations. The fish has lost its eyes entirely, no longer needing them in a world with no dawn. And yet, scientists at New York University and the National Autonomous University of Mexico discovered something startling. These fish still possess circadian rhythms. Using genetic analysis, researchers found that core clock genes in cavefish still cycle daily, though often with a slightly altered rhythm. Without environmental cues, their internal clocks run long, 26, even 28 hours, like a metronome with no conductor. Some rhythms fade, others persist. It's as though their bodies remember the sun even after forgetting how to see it. And what of creatures even simpler? Coral, for instance. It may look like rock, but it's an animal, a colony of tiny polyps, pulsing gently in the currents. Each year in warm ocean waters, corals participate in one of the most precise reproductive rituals on Earth. They spawn synchronously, releasing eggs and sperm into the sea on a single night, guided by water temperature, moonlight, and internal clocks. One study in the Red Sea showed that coral spawning was linked to expressions of clock genes remarkably similar to those in humans. Even crickets, those nighttime musicians, are creatures of time. If raised in total darkness, they still chirp on a cycle that mimics a day. In fact, the frequency of their song changes predictably with temperature and time of day. It's not just a serenade, it's a schedule. A study at the University of Regensburg found that when crickets' optic lobes were surgically removed, they lost their ability to synchronize to external light cues, but not their internal rhythm. The beat remained. The drummer, though blinded, kept playing. Then there are marine worms like Platinaris jumerili, who live in the intertidal zones of European coasts. These small wriggling creatures follow not just circadian rhythms, but circulunar rhythms, monthly patterns guided by the phases of the moon. They emerge from the sand and release gametes at the same point in the lunar cycle each month, a process controlled by a combination of clock genes and light-sensitive proteins tuned to moonlight, not just sunlight. Why do such rhythms persist? Evolutionarily speaking, rhythm offers an advantage. An animal that can anticipate the best time to hunt, hide, feed, or reproduce has a better chance of survival than one reacting randomly. Rhythms reduce uncertainty. They bring order to a chaotic world, even in the most extreme environments. Polar regions with months of day or night, ocean trenches without light or warmth, underground layers where seasons never change. Clocks endure. The naked mole rat, that strange little mammal that lives entirely underground, once baffled researchers. Living in constant darkness and operating in a social system not unlike ants, it seemed a perfect candidate for clocklessness. But when scientists looked closer, they found that mole rats do indeed have circadian genes. Their rhythms are faint, easily overwritten by social cues, but they are present. In these colonies, time is shared behaviorally rather than photically. The colony eats, works, and rests as a unit, and that collective rhythm shapes individual clocks. Even in the insect world, clocks can take odd turns. The honeybee, perhaps one of the most time-conscious creatures, uses internal rhythms to forage with near-military precision. Bees trained to feed at specific times of day will return to the same spot on a schedule, even if the food is removed. Their brains use time as a map. In fact, when researchers at the University of Würzburg blocked expression of the cryptochrome gene in bees, their ability to time their foraging collapsed. The dance remained, but the tempo was lost. These scattered clues from unlikely creatures all point to a single truth: biological timekeeping is foundational. It is not a human invention. It is a feature of life itself, coded deep into genes, emerging again and again in forms large and small. Whether it guides a jellyfish pulsing in the surf, a bat echolocating through dusk, or a microscopic worm dancing to moonlight, the rhythm remains. And these rhythms, though hidden, bind us together. When you take your morning walk and pass a blooming flower, a bird song, or the distant hum of insect wings, you're not moving through a static world. You're part of a grand choreography. You're in a concert where each player has found their cue, not by chance, but by internal precision honed over millennia. Timekeeping, it turns out, is not the crown of complexity. It is the language of life, and even those without eyes, or ears, or sunlight still find the beat. We live in an age where you can track your steps, your heartbeat, your blood oxygen, even your REM sleep with something that fits on your wrist. And yet for most people, their circadian rhythm, the invisible clock that governs almost every aspect of physiology, remains a mystery. You cannot feel your melatonin levels rise. You do not sense the exact moment your liver enzymes shift gears. But the technology to make these rhythms visible, even manageable, is arriving. Welcome to the frontier of personal circadian science. The idea is simple, if revolutionary. If you could measure your internal time with precision, you could align your life, meals, work, exercise, medication, not just with the hour on a wall clock, but with the rhythms inside your own cells. You could work when your brain is sharpest, eat when your metabolism is most receptive, and rest when your body needs it most. To do this, researchers have been developing wearable devices and algorithms that interpret signals from the body, skin temperature, heart rate, movement patterns, and light exposure to estimate your circadian phase. One such project, spearheaded by the Center for Circadian and Sleep Medicine at Northwestern University, involves a non-invasive patch that monitors core temperature and light history to track internal time with remarkable accuracy. Other research groups, like those at Harvard and Stanford, are exploring blood-based diagnostics. By taking a small sample at a known time and measuring the expression of specific genes, many of which fluctuate predictably over the day, they can estimate your internal circadian phase. In early studies, this method, known as time signature analysis, could determine the body's biological time within a margin of 1 to 2 hours. Imagine walking into your doctor's office, and instead of being asked simply how you're sleeping, being shown a full map of your internal rhythms, when your body wants to wake, when your peak cognitive performance occurs, when your liver detoxifies most effectively. Healthcare, seen through this lens, becomes deeply personalized, not just by genetics or lifestyle, but by timing, and timing matters. We've already seen that medication effectiveness, immune response, and even surgery outcomes depend on the hour they occur. With circadian-aware medicine, prescriptions might come not only with instructions about dosage and food, but also with clocks. Take this pill at 7:30 a.m., not because it fits your schedule, but because that's when your cells are most receptive. Athletes too are paying attention. Elite sports teams have begun experimenting with light exposure, sleep scheduling, and even customized meal timing to align performance with circadian rhythms. It turns out that muscle strength, coordination, and even pain tolerance fluctuate over the day, peaking in the late afternoon for most people. Training and competition, when scheduled with this in mind, may offer an edge. But the biggest transformation may be for the average person navigating the blur of modern life. Many of us wake by alarm, work under artificial lights, eat meals at irregular hours, and scroll through screens late into the night. The result is a daily scramble against our own biology, a mismatch known as circadian desynchrony. Over time, this can affect metabolism, mood, and even longevity. Personal circadian tracking could offer a way out of the scramble. Imagine a morning notification that says, "Your melatonin levels are dropping, this is your ideal window to get natural light." Or an evening prompt, "Your internal night has begun. Time to power down bright screens." These are not abstract suggestions. They are targeted nudges from a system that knows not just how your day is going, but when your day is. Some companies are already trying to bring this to market. One startup, based in California, has developed a smart ring that estimates circadian phase based on a blend of biometric signals and environmental data. It uses this information to guide users toward better light exposure and sleep timing, tailored to their own biology, rather than one-size-fits-all advice. Another group is building software that integrates with existing wearable fitness trackers, using algorithms trained on large datasets of circadian gene expression to predict internal time. The idea is not just to monitor your rhythm, but to coach it. Like a circadian personal trainer, reminding you when to step into the sunlight or delay that afternoon coffee. Of course, this raises questions. Will people want to schedule their lives by biology? What if your ideal time for focus is at odds with your work hours? What happens when your body's rhythm disagrees with your calendar? These are challenges not just of science, but of culture. Still, the promise is enormous. For patients managing chronic illness, for shift workers battling misalignment, for students trying to learn at their peak, and for anyone simply trying to feel a little better day to day, knowing your internal time could be transformative. Even more transformative is the idea of using this knowledge preventively. If we can detect the early signs of circadian disruption before it leads to metabolic or cognitive problems, we might intervene early, gently realigning lifestyle to restore harmony. This is not about adding more devices or stress to daily life. Quite the opposite. It's about syncing up with the clock already inside you, humming away in the quiet background of your being. Because the future of health may not lie in more speed or more complexity, it may lie in better timing. And sometimes, all it takes is a little light at the right time to bring the rhythm back into view. If you listen closely, no, not with your ears, but with something deeper, you might feel it. A gentle rhythm, a quiet beat beneath your routines and your plans and your to-do lists. It isn't ticking in seconds or minutes. It's unfolding in waves, rising cortisol in the morning, dipping body temperature at night, a surge of alertness after lunch, a craving for stillness when dusk softens the sky. This rhythm has been with you since before you were born. It is not yours alone. All living things keep time, and this time is not kept by the clocks we wear or the calendars we hang. It's something more intimate, a choreography written into the genome, whispered from cell to cell, passed on from a line of ancestors who watched the stars, felt the seasons, and shaped their lives around the sun. To live in rhythm is to be in conversation with the world. Consider this: your cells do not wait for your permission. Each morning, as light touches your eyes, specialized ganglion cells send word to your master clock. The suprachiasmatic nucleus that day has arrived. This tiny bundle of neurons takes that message and begins a symphony, alerting your adrenal glands to release cortisol, cueing your digestive system to prepare for food, and slowly turning down melatonin, the hormone that softens the edge of night. As this happens, your body aligns with the sun. Your liver begins metabolizing more efficiently, your muscles warm, ready to move, even your mood brightens, not because something joyful has happened, but because your rhythm has turned toward wakefulness. This is the quiet intelligence of your biology. And then evening comes, the light wanes, your temperature drops, melatonin begins to rise again, and your organs prepare for a long pause. Healing begins, memories consolidate, and your body, still humming with the same quiet purpose, continues its rhythmic repair. You are not alone in this pattern. The whales, swimming their long dark migrations, the foxes, slipping out under moonlight, the trees, slowly turning their leaves to the sun, then dropping them like clocks resetting, the plankton rising and falling with the tide. All of them are moving to rhythms older than language, older than gravity itself. There's humility in this, and maybe also comfort. You do not have to manage every moment. Your body already knows how to rise, how to rest, how to heal. It knows when to release growth hormone, when to detoxify, when to build and when to break down. All it asks is that you listen. And if listening sounds like something only poets or monks do, know this: a simple walk outside in the morning light is a conversation with your internal clock, a consistent mealtime, a gentle winding down in the evening, a moment of quiet before bed. These are not small habits, they are acts of alignment. Modern life, of course, makes this difficult. We stretch our days with glowing screens, we fly across time zones faster than our clocks can follow. We work shifts that turn night into day, and yet the rhythm endures. It wobbles, yes, but it never disappears. Like the tide, it waits for the moon. Like breath, it returns. In the years to come, perhaps we will learn to honor this rhythm more fully, not as a limitation, but as a guide. We will design lighting that speaks gently to our circadian needs. We will schedule our work and meals and medicine according to internal time. We will stop asking our bodies to rush and start asking how best to move with the music. If the last few decades have taught us anything, it's that biology is not a fixed blueprint. It is a living rhythm, flexible, responsive, and full of potential. And when we live in harmony with that rhythm, something remarkable happens. We don't just function better, we feel better, clearer, quieter, more like ourselves. So take a breath, look around, the light on your skin, the pulse in your chest, the hunger rising before noon. They're all messages, tapping you on the shoulder, telling you what time it is, not in hours, but in life. If you enjoyed this little journey into the secret life of time, please consider leaving a like, subscribing, or leaving a comment. Sleep well, fellow traveler. The trees, the stars, or the atoms are whispering, and you're always welcome here.